She mistook a mob heir for her best friend's cheating fiancé and called him a circus ringmaster in front of New York's most dangerous men. She should have died. Instead, his mother decided Ruby Harrison was perfect wife material, and in the Santino family, what Victoria wants, Victoria gets. Before we continue, if you love powerful storytelling, hit that subscribe button now. I create these stories for people like you who appreciate depth and emotion. It's free, takes 2 seconds, and ensures you never miss what comes next. All right, let's dive in. The rain hammered against the windows of Bellissimo as Ruby Harrison pressed her face closer to the glass, her breath fogging the pain. There he was, Brian Fletcher, Emma's lying cheating excuse for a fiancé. The blood-red suit was unmistakable, practically screaming for attention like a matador taunting a bull. Ruby's jaw clenched. She'd suspected for weeks, ever since Emma mentioned Brian's late-night work meetings and the perfume that definitely wasn't Emma's signature vanilla scent. But seeing him here, laughing with some blonde woman dripping in diamonds, made her blood boil. "That absolute garbage human," she muttered, pushing through the heavy oak doors. The restaurant fell into a hushed reverence as she entered. Not for her, but for the establishment itself. Bellissimo wasn't just a restaurant. It was a temple where New York's most dangerous men broke bread and occasionally each other's kneecaps. The kind of place where the veal was excellent and the secrets were deadly. Crystal chandeliers cast golden light over white tablecloths that probably cost more than Ruby's monthly rent. Every surface gleamed with old money and new threats. Ruby's heels clicked against the marble floor like gunshots in a library. Every wise guy in the room turned to watch. Women who walked into Bellissimo alone were either connected to someone terrifying or about to become a cautionary tale. Ruby Harrison was neither, but her fury gave her the stride of someone who owned the place. The mountain of a doorman had tried to stop her at the entrance. She'd given him a look that could wilt flowers, the same look her grandmother used to give men who underestimated her, and somehow, miraculously, he'd stepped aside. Confidence, even misplaced confidence, was a currency here. Ruby had accidentally stumbled into using counterfeit bills, but they were working. She marched straight to the table where the man in the blood-red suit sat, his date laughing at something he'd said. The woman's laugh was too loud, too performative, the kind of laugh that cost money and came with an expiration date. Ruby's hands balled into fists at her sides. "Brian Fletcher, you miserable." The man looked up, and Ruby's words died in her throat for half a second. Wrong eyes. They weren't the muddy brown of Emma's fiancé. These were winter steel, sharp and assessing, the kind of eyes that had seen things Ruby couldn't imagine and had made peace with all of them. Wrong jaw, stronger, carved like a Roman statue some artist had spent years perfecting. Wrong nose, patrician and straight. Not the slightly crooked one Brian had from a college rugby incident he loved bragging about. Wrong, everything. But Ruby was already tumbling off the cliff of her own rage, and there was no climbing back up. The momentum of her anger carried her forward like an avalanche that had already left the mountain. "Cheating on Emma wasn't enough for you," she continued, her voice rising with each word. "Now you're here dressed like a circus ringmaster with some woman old enough to be your mother." She jabbed a finger at the elegant gray-haired woman across from him. "No offense, ma'am, but my friend is 26 and doesn't need whatever Botox cocktail you're serving." The restaurant went silent. Even the kitchen seemed to stop clattering. Somewhere, a fork clinked against a plate, obscenely loud in the sudden quiet. It was the kind of silence that preceded either violence or comedy, and no one in the room was quite sure which they were about to witness. The gray-haired woman lowered her teacup with the deliberate grace of someone who'd orchestrated coups over afternoon tea. Her smile was like a Renaissance painting, beautiful, mysterious, and vaguely threatening, the kind of smile Mona Lisa might have worn if she'd been planning a murder. "Fascinating," she murmured, her voice carrying a hint of amusement that made Ruby's skin prickle. The man stood slowly, unfolding to a height of at least 6'2". His presence filled the space like smoke, curling into every corner, making the air feel thicker. Up close, Ruby could see the expensive cut of his suit, Not just red, but crimson silk that probably cost more than her car. Scratch that. More than 3 of her cars if she'd owned 3 cars instead of taking the subway like a normal person. "I think you've made a mistake," he said, his voice dangerously calm. It was the kind of calm that came before hurricanes, the eye of a storm that was about to destroy everything in its path. "The only mistake," Ruby shot back, adrenaline drowning out the warning bells clanging in her head like fire alarms, "was Emma trusting you in the first place. What kind of man cheats on someone who bakes him cookies every Sunday and remembers his mother's birthday better than he does?" "My name," he said with the patience of someone explaining basic mathematics to a particularly stubborn child, "is Marcus Santino, not Brian, whatever you said." The name hit Ruby like a physical blow. Her knees actually buckled slightly. The room seemed to tilt on its axis, and for a wild moment she thought the chandeliers might come crashing down because the universe itself was recoiling from her stupidity. Everyone in New York knew that name. You didn't have to be connected to know about the Santinos. They were in the newspapers, though always carefully, always with lawyers hovering. They were whispered about in bodegas and shouted about in precincts. The Santino family didn't just run businesses, they ran boroughs. They were the kind of family whose Christmas cards probably had body counts on them, tastefully embossed in gold leaf. And Marcus Santino was the crown prince of this empire, the heir to a kingdom built on fear, loyalty, and strategically placed concrete. Ruby had seen his picture in the Post once, leaving a courthouse after some charges that mysteriously disappeared. Even in grainy newsprint, he'd looked dangerous. "Oh," Ruby whispered, her voice suddenly very small. "Oh, no." "Oh, yes," the older woman said, standing with theatrical timing that suggested she'd been waiting for exactly this moment. She moved with the grace of old money and older power. Her navy dress simple but clearly designer. Pearls at her throat caught the light. "What's your name, dear?" "Ruby. Ruby Harrison." Her voice had gone from righteous fury to mouse squeak in record time. Survival instinct was finally kicking in, about 3 minutes too late to do any good. She was that person in horror movies who realized the house was haunted only after signing the mortgage. The woman circled her like a shark that had just spotted something interesting in the water. Ruby could feel her gaze taking inventory. The off-the-rack dress from Macy's clearance section, the heels she'd owned since college, the natural hair she'd spent 2 hours twisting that morning, being cataloged, assessed, valued. "I'm Victoria Santino, Marcus's mother." She extended a hand heavy with rings that could probably pay off Ruby's student loans twice over. "And I must say, I appreciate what I just witnessed." "You appreciate it?" Ruby's brain was struggling to process. She'd just insulted a crime boss, in his own restaurant, in front of his mother, and the mother was pleased. Honesty, fire, the courage to speak truth when it's dangerous. Victoria's eyes glittered with something that might have been amusement or might have been madness. Possibly both. Probably both. These are rare qualities in our world. Most people who approach my son either want something or fear him too much to speak at all. "Mrs. Santino, I'm so sorry. I thought he was someone else." "Oh, I gathered that." Victoria waved a dismissive hand. "But your mistake has proven illuminating. Marcus, I've made a decision." Marcus closed his eyes like a man who knew exactly what was coming and was already exhausted by it. "Mother, she's perfect." "Perfect for what?" Ruby asked, though some primal part of her brain was already screaming the answer. "Run," it said. "Run now, while you still can." "To marry my son." The room exploded in whispers. 20 conversations erupted at once, a cacophony of disbelief and speculation. Ruby heard fragments. Did she just say, marry? Who is that girl? Santino's getting married? Marcus's hand went to his forehead like he was checking for a fever, or possibly checking if his skull had cracked open from the sheer insanity of the situation. Ruby wondered if she was having a stroke. That would explain things. The hallucination. The sense that reality had taken a hard left turn into the twilight zone. Maybe she'd slipped on the wet pavement outside and was currently unconscious on Mulberry Street, dreaming this entire nightmare. You just called the future head of the Santino family a circus ringmaster in front of 20 witnesses, Victoria continued, her voice carrying through the restaurant like a royal proclamation, silencing the whispers. And you're still breathing. That takes either courage or stupidity, and frankly, my son needs someone with both. Mrs. Santino, Ruby started, but Victoria was on a roll. Tomorrow, 3 o'clock, Chambers Street Courthouse. Wear something nice. Not too nice. We're keeping this simple. Save the big wedding for later, when the family can be properly notified. Mother, this is insane, Marcus said, his voice tight with the kind of control that suggested he was mentally counting to 10 in multiple languages. You can't just. This is necessary. Victoria's tone shifted, losing its theatrical edge. For just a moment, Ruby saw something raw in the older woman's expression. Worry, fear, even. You're 32 years old, Marcus. You're surrounded by gold diggers who want your money and social climbers who want your name. You trust no one. You feel nothing. You're becoming exactly what I tried to prevent. Marcus's jaw tightened. That's not. You're becoming your father. Victoria's words fell like stones into water, creating ripples of tension. Cold, isolated, suspicious of everything. It's going to destroy you, and I won't stand by and watch it happen. The restaurant had gone silent again. This was clearly family business being aired in public, and everyone knew enough to pretend they weren't listening while hanging on every word. Victoria turned back to Ruby. You'll marry him, be protected, want for nothing. And give me grandchildren who aren't sociopaths. The bar is surprisingly low in this family, dear. I just need them to have a conscience and some basic empathy. And if I say no? Ruby's voice came out steadier than she felt. Her grandmother had always said Ruby had more spine than sense. This seemed like an excellent example. Victoria's smile never wavered, but her eyes went arctic. The temperature in the immediate vicinity seemed to drop 10 degrees. Then I'll be very disappointed, and dear, nobody disappoints Victoria Santino twice. She let that hang in the air for a moment before continuing, her voice almost gentle. The first time you get a beautiful funeral, white roses, very tasteful. We spare no expense. The second time. She trailed off meaningfully. Well, let's just say the Hudson River is very deep and doesn't give up its secrets easily. Ruby's mouth went dry. Her hands were shaking now, adrenaline and fear and sheer disbelief coursing through her system. This couldn't be happening. People didn't get forced into marriage in 21st century New York. This was the stuff of soap operas and mafia movies, not real life. Except it was happening. Right now. To her. Across the restaurant, she caught a glimpse of the actual Brian Fletcher slipping toward the exit with his blonde companion. He'd seen everything and was wisely making himself scarce, probably thanking whatever God-cheating scumbags prayed to that he wasn't the one in Ruby's current position. And then something shifted in Ruby's mind. An idea formed, possibly the worst idea of her life, or possibly the best. She was already in this impossible situation, already facing down a crime family, already apparently getting married tomorrow, whether she liked it or not. She might as well get something out of it. If I agree, Ruby said suddenly, surprised by her own voice cutting through the tension, I want something. Victoria's eyebrows rose, delicate arches that suggested both surprise and approval. Behind her, Marcus made a sound that might have been a laugh or might have been someone choking on their own disbelief. Negotiating already, Victoria said, her smile widening. I like you even more. Most people just cower and agree. You've got leverage and you're smart enough to use it. Go on. Ruby pointed across the restaurant at Brian, who had frozen mid-escape like a deer caught in headlights. That man there. The one actually wearing the ridiculous suit. He's been lying to my best friend, cheating on her, making her think she's crazy when she questions him. I want him to pay. Marcus followed her finger, his expression shifting from resignation to something almost like interest. Brian Fletcher, he said, and there was a wealth of information in those two words. He knew exactly who Brian was, what he did, probably what he had for breakfast. He runs numbers for the Moretti family, small-time operation, thinks he's more important than he is. Not anymore, Victoria said, snapping her fingers with the casual authority of someone used to commanding armies. Two men materialized from the shadows. Ruby hadn't even seen them standing there, which was terrifying in itself. They moved to block Brian's exit with the efficiency of people who'd done this 1,000 times before. After tonight, Victoria continued, her voice carrying across the restaurant so Brian could hear every word, Mr. Fletcher will find himself unemployed, unemployable. His debts called in, his protection revoked. Every favor he's ever relied on will evaporate. Every bridge he thought he'd built will burn. He'll be lucky if he can get a job washing dishes in Newark by the time we're through with him. Ruby watched Brian's face go white, then gray, then a sort of greenish color that suggested his expensive dinner might be making a reappearance. His blonde companion was already edging away from him, recognizing a sinking ship when she saw one. In the world these people inhabited, association with the disgraced was its own form of contamination. His girl, Emma, was it? Victoria asked Ruby. Emma Chen. She's a kindergarten teacher. She bakes cookies for her students and volunteers at animal shelters. She's literally too good for this world. And definitely too good for him. Emma Chen will receive an anonymous tip about Mr. Fletcher's activities, along with photographic evidence of his indiscretions. She'll also receive a gift certificate to that new spa in Soho. What's it called, Marcus? Serenity Now, Marcus supplied, his tone suggesting he couldn't believe he was having this conversation. Yes, that one. $5,000 worth of treatments. She'll need pampering after she dumps his sorry ass. Victoria looked at Ruby with something like approval. You're loyal to your friends. That's good. Loyalty matters in a family like ours. Ruby felt dizzy. This was actually happening. She was negotiating her forced marriage like a business deal, and somehow it was working. Deal, she heard herself say. Victoria extended her hand, soft skin over steel bones, rings that had probably been in the family for generations, pressing cool against Ruby's palm. Your loyalty and marriage for our protection, and Brian Fletcher's ruin. Plus, you'll want for nothing. Housing, expenses, security, all taken care of. You'll sign a prenuptial agreement tomorrow before the ceremony. Very generous terms, I assure you. I believe in fair compensation. Ruby looked at the offered hand, then at Marcus, who was watching her with a mixture of resignation and something that might have been curiosity. His eyes weren't cold anymore. They were calculating, reassessing. She thought about Emma, about Brian's betrayal, about her own crushing student debt and dead-end job at the marketing firm where her boss took credit for her ideas. About her shoebox apartment in Queens with the radiator that clanged like a prisoner trying to escape, about the fact that Victoria Santino didn't make idle threats, and refusing meant consequences Ruby didn't want to contemplate. She shook Victoria's hand. The older woman's grip was firm, sealing something that felt more binding than any legal contract. Deal. As Marcus escorted her out, his hand barely touching her elbow in a gesture that managed to be both courteous and proprietary, Ruby caught one last glimpse of Brian being escorted toward the back of the restaurant. His face had gone from green to sheet white. The blonde was long gone, her survival instincts clearly sharper than her moral compass. Where are they taking him? Ruby asked, then immediately wondered if she wanted to know the answer. Somewhere to have a conversation about respect and consequences, Marcus said. His voice was neutral, but there was steel underneath. Don't worry, we're not animals. He'll walk out, eventually, just significantly poorer and considerably wiser. The rain was still falling when they stepped outside, turning the street into a river of reflected neon and headlights. Marcus opened an umbrella, holding it over both of them. The gesture was automatic, probably ingrained from childhood etiquette lessons that also covered things like proper wine pairings and efficient body disposal. You should know, he said quietly as they walked to a waiting black car that was definitely worth more than Ruby's annual salary. My mother always gets what she wants. Is that a threat? A warning. He looked at her then, really looked at her, and Ruby saw something human beneath the dangerous exterior, something tired. But for what it's worth, I think you just did something very brave or very stupid. Which one? I'll let you know after the wedding. There was the ghost of a smile at the corner of his mouth. Not quite humor, but close enough to count. Marcus opened the car door for her. The interior smelled like leather and money. Where are you taking me? Home. Your home. You'll want to explain to your roommate why there are now armed guards in your hallway. He paused, checking his phone. Vincent and Carlo are already in position. They're under strict instructions to be unobtrusive. Armed guards? Ruby's voice climbed an octave. You're engaged to a Santino now. That makes you a target for every rival family and ambitious opportunist in the 5 boroughs. The guards aren't optional. He slid into the seat beside her, and the driver pulled away from the curb with the smooth efficiency of someone who'd done this 10,000 times. Ruby watched Bellissimo disappear into the rain-soaked night, the golden light from its windows growing smaller. This is insane. 20 minutes ago, I was just going to confront my friend's cheating boyfriend. Now, I'm engaged to a mob boss with armed guards and a marriage certificate appointment tomorrow. Technically, I'm not a mob boss, yet. That's my uncle's job. I'm more like middle management with violent tendencies. The corner of his mouth twitched. Was that a joke? Had Marcus Santino just made a joke? This isn't funny. It's a little funny. You called me a circus ringmaster. He looked at her, and this time there was definitely amusement in those winter steel eyes. My mother loved that. She's been trying to get me to wear more conservative suits for years. Despite everything, the fear, the shock, the sheer impossibility of her situation, Ruby felt a laugh bubble up. It came out slightly hysterical, but it was a laugh. I really thought you were Brian, the suit, the hair. The man has terrible taste. I'm almost insulted by the comparison. The car glided through Manhattan traffic, and Ruby pressed her forehead against the cool window. Tomorrow, she was marrying into the mob. Tonight, she needed to figure out how to explain to her roommate Keisha why their hallway now featured men who probably had more weapons than personality. For what it's worth, Marcus said quietly, I'll make sure you're safe. Whatever else this marriage is, you'll be protected. It should have been comforting. Instead, it just reminded Ruby how much danger she was actually in. Quick pause. If you're invested in this story, subscribe so you don't miss the next one. YouTube's algorithm is unpredictable, and I'd hate for you to lose this channel. Hit subscribe, turn on notifications, and let's continue this journey together. Ruby's apartment building had never looked more humble than it did with 2 men in expensive suits flanking the entrance. Vincent and Carlo, she assumed those were their names, nodded as Marcus walked her inside. They looked like they could bench press small cars and had probably done worse to actual people. Keisha was watching a reality show when Ruby walked in, still damp from the rain. Her roommate took one look at Ruby's face and hit pause. Girl, what happened? You look like you've seen a ghost, or committed a felony. Please tell me you didn't actually fight that man. I need wine. Do we have wine? We have box wine from Trader Joe's. It's a Tuesday. Why do you need wine on a Tuesday? Keisha followed Ruby into their tiny kitchen. Ruby, you're scaring me. What's going on? Ruby poured herself a generous glass, took a long drink, and said, I'm getting married tomorrow. Keisha blinked. To who? You're not even dating anyone. Unless, wait, is this about Jake from accounting? Because he's already married, Ruby, I told you. No, not Jake. Ruby took another drink. To Marcus Santino. The silence stretched. Keisha's mouth opened, closed, opened again. The Marcus Santino. The crime family Santino? The man whose picture was in the Post last month leaving federal court? That's the one. Ruby Harrison, you better start from the beginning, because I know you didn't just say you're marrying into the Italian Mafia tomorrow like you're picking up dry cleaning. So Ruby explained. The whole ridiculous, terrifying story came tumbling out. Brian, the mistaken identity. Victoria's decree, the deal. Keisha listened with increasing alarm. her eyes growing wider with each detail. "This is insane," Keisha said when Ruby finished. "You can't marry a mobster because his mother liked your attitude. That's not how life works. Tell that to Victoria Santino." "Ruby, they kill people. Like actually kill people. With guns and concrete shoes and whatever else mobsters use these days." "I know." Ruby's voice was small. "But, Keisha, she gave me a choice. Marry her son or disappoint her. And the way she said it, people who disappoint Victoria Santino don't get second chances. So, you're being forced into this. I'm being strongly encouraged with life or death stakes." Ruby laughed, but it came out hollow. "Plus, I got Brian destroyed. He's finished. Emma will finally be free of him." Keisha's expression softened slightly. "That's something at least. Emma deserves better than that cheating snake." She paused. "But, Ruby, what about you? What do you deserve?" Before Ruby could answer, there was a knock at the door. Both women jumped. Through the peephole, Ruby saw a well-dressed man holding a garment bag and briefcase. "Miss Harrison, my name is Thomas. Mrs. Santino sent me with some items for tomorrow." Ruby opened the door. Thomas entered with the practiced efficiency of someone used to handling delicate situations. He was older, gray at the temples, with the bearing of a British butler in a period drama. "Mrs. Santino thought you might need appropriate attire for the ceremony," he said, hanging the garment bag carefully on their coat rack. "She also asked me to review the prenuptial agreement with you this evening, to ensure you understand the terms before signing tomorrow." Keisha made a strangled noise. "Prenup? There's a prenup? Of course there's a prenup. Why wouldn't there be a prenup for the insane, forced marriage?" Thomas ignored her, opening his briefcase with professional calm. "The agreement is quite generous, Miss Harrison. Mrs. Santino believes in fair compensation for services rendered. You'll have full access to family resources, a monthly allowance, legal immunity for activities conducted under family business, and, in the event of divorce or widowhood, a settlement of $10 million plus property holdings." Ruby's wine glass slipped from her fingers. It didn't break, their carpet was too cheap and plush for that, but wine spread across the floor like a burgundy crime scene. $10 million? The courthouse was nearly empty at 3 o'clock on a Wednesday. Ruby stood on the steps in the midnight blue dress Victoria had sent, silk that moved like water, designer label she'd only seen in magazines. Her natural hair was swept up in a style Keisha had managed despite her protests about the entire situation. Emma had called that morning, crying with relief about finally seeing Brian's true nature, unknowingly giving Ruby a blessing for the insanity she was about to commit. Marcus waited at the top of the steps in a black suit that probably cost more than Ruby's college tuition. He looked like he'd stepped out of a Renaissance painting. Beautiful, dangerous, untouchable. When he saw her, something flickered in his expression. Not quite surprise, but close. "You came," he said. "Did I have a choice?" "Everyone has a choice, Ruby. Even when it doesn't feel like it." He offered his arm. "Shall we get this over with?" The ceremony was perfunctory. A tired judge who'd clearly performed this service for the Santino family before read the words with mechanical efficiency. Ruby barely heard them. She was too focused on the surreal reality that she was actually doing this, actually marrying a man she'd met 24 hours ago while screaming at him about infidelity. When Marcus slipped the platinum band on her finger, perfect fit, how had Victoria known her size? Ruby wondered if she was dreaming, if she'd wake up in her apartment to find this had all been some wine-induced nightmare. "You may kiss the bride." Marcus's lips barely brushed hers, but somehow it felt more intimate than any real kiss. His hand cupped her face for just a moment. And Ruby felt the warmth of his skin, smelled his cologne, something expensive and understated. Then it was over, and she was Ruby Santino. The name felt foreign, wrong, like wearing someone else's clothes. Outside, Victoria emerged from an escalade like a queen from a carriage. "Congratulations, my dear. Welcome to the family." She kissed Ruby's cheeks, then turned to Marcus. "Take your wife home. The Tribeca apartment is ready." "How did you—" Ruby started. I'm thorough, dear. Dinner is at 7. The whole family will be there. Rest. You'll need your strength." Victoria's smile was warm, but her eyes held a warning. This was Ruby's first test. The Tribeca penthouse overlooked the Hudson. Floor-to-ceiling windows, hardwood floors, furniture that belonged in architecture magazines. Ruby stood in the living room, feeling like an imposter in a museum. "Guest rooms are down the hall," Marcus said, loosening his tie. The gesture made him look more human, less like a marble statue. "You'll have privacy. We're not sharing a bed. This marriage might be my mother's idea, but I'm not a complete barbarian." He poured whiskey from a crystal decanter, offered her a glass. Ruby took it because she needed something to do with her hands. "This is temporary," he continued, "an arrangement. Eventually we'll figure out how to—" He paused, searching for words. "Navigate this situation." Ruby should have felt relieved. Instead, she felt insulted, which was ridiculous. "Your mother thinks I'm perfect for you." "My mother thought my father was trustworthy until she found out he was embezzling from the family and sleeping with his accountant. Her instincts aren't infallible." Marcus's voice was bitter. "She killed him herself, you know. Shot him in his office. Very efficient, very final." Ruby's whiskey went down the wrong pipe. She coughed, eyes watering. "She what?" "Family secret." "Well, open secret. Everyone knows, nobody talks about it." He studied his glass. "That's the world you've married into, Ruby. We solve problems permanently." "Then teach me," Ruby said suddenly. "If I'm stuck here, if I'm a Santino now, teach me how to survive it." Something flickered in Marcus's eyes. Respect, maybe, or surprise. What would you do in Ruby's position? Stay and learn to survive in this dangerous new world, or risk everything to escape? Drop your thoughts in the comments. The family dinner was held at Victoria's estate in Westchester, a sprawling mansion that made the Tribeca penthouse look like a studio apartment. Ruby's hands were shaking as Marcus helped her out of the car. She'd changed into another dress from the mysterious wardrobe that had appeared in the penthouse closet, this one emerald green and deceptively simple. "Lesson 1, Marcus said quietly as they approached the door. "At dinner, speak only when spoken to. Observe everything. Trust no one. Not even you. Especially not me." But his hand found the small of her back, a gesture that felt almost protective. "My uncle Antonio runs the family now. He took over after Mother, handled the succession issue. He'll test you. They all will." The dining room could have seated 30. Crystal chandeliers, oil paintings of stern-faced ancestors, a table that had probably witnessed a century of family drama and strategic planning. Antonio Santino sat at the head, older than Marcus, harder, with eyes like chips of ice. Around the table sat various family members, all watching Ruby with predatory interest. Victoria sat to Antonio's right, serene as a Madonna in a painting that definitely hid a knife behind her back. "So, this is the girl who screamed at my nephew," Antonio said, not bothering with pleasantries. "The one who called him a circus act in front of half of Little Italy." Ruby's throat was dry. She felt every eye on her, weighing, measuring, finding her lacking. "Yes, sir. That was me." "And Victoria decided this qualified you for marriage." His tone suggested he thought his sister-in-law had lost her mind. "What exactly do you bring to this family besides a mouth that doesn't know when to stay shut?" The table went silent. This was the test Marcus had warned her about. Ruby could feel Victoria watching her, Marcus tense beside her. She thought about cowering, apologizing, trying to make herself small and unthreatening. Then she thought about her grandmother, who'd raised Ruby alone after her parents died, who'd taught her that respect was earned, not given, who'd never backed down from anyone. Ruby met Antonio's gaze directly. "Loyalty that can't be bought, sir, unlike some things." The silence stretched. Antonio's eyes narrowed dangerously. Ruby's heart hammered against her ribs. She'd either just earned respect or signed her own death warrant. Then Antonio laughed, a genuine booming sound that echoed off the walls. "She's got spine. Victoria, you might actually be right about this one." The tension broke. Conversation resumed. Ruby felt Marcus's hand squeeze hers under the table. Approval or relief, she couldn't tell which. The dinner proceeded with careful politeness, discussions of business that skirted just this side of legal, references to people and situations Ruby didn't understand. She stayed quiet, watching, learning. The family dynamics were complex. Alliances and rivalries, old grudges and newer tensions. After dessert, Victoria pulled Ruby aside into a library that smelled of leather and old paper. She pressed a small key into Ruby's palm. Safety deposit box at Merchant Bank. Box 347. Victoria's voice was low, urgent. Evidence, insurance. If anything happens to me, that box is yours. Everything you need to protect yourself is inside. Mrs. Santino. Victoria, dear, we're family now. Her smile was warm, but her eyes were deadly serious. And family protects family. Remember that. In this world, loyalty is currency, and betrayal is death. Know the difference. Back in the car, Marcus was quiet. Ruby watched the lights of the city blur past, trying to process everything. You survived, Marcus finally said. Antonio doesn't laugh at just anyone. That was his version of approval. I'm terrified every second, Ruby admitted, but fear doesn't mean silence. For the first time, Marcus smiled. Really smiled. It transformed his harsh features, made him look younger, almost vulnerable. Maybe Mother wasn't completely insane. That night, back at the penthouse, Ruby lay in her guest room, staring at the ceiling. The key Victoria had given her was in her nightstand drawer. A small piece of insurance in a world where she had almost no power. She'd entered this marriage as a prisoner, but the cage was starting to feel like possibility. 3 weeks into the marriage, Ruby woke to find Marcus gone and a note on the kitchen counter. Meeting downtown. Drivers outside if needed. M. She called Victoria. I need to understand what I married into. There was approval in Victoria's voice. Finally asking the right questions. Metropolitan Club. 1 hour. Victoria slid a leather folder across the table at the elegant club where old money met new power. 3 generations of careful cultivation. Inside were organizational charts, loan sharking, protection rackets, legitimate businesses that served as fronts. At the center of it all, Marcus's name. He runs all of this, Ruby said, not quite a question. Marcus is operations chief. Antonio's the diplomat. The face, but Marcus makes it function. He's brilliant, strategic, and completely isolated. Which is why he needs you. Victoria poured tea with steady hands. Can you live in the gray, Ruby? Not quite legal, not quite criminal. Can you be part of this family while keeping your soul intact? Ruby thought of Brian, disappeared like smoke, of the power Victoria wielded with a snap of her fingers, of Marcus's lonely eyes. I'm already living in it. Victoria smiled. I have a proposition. I want you to manage the legitimate businesses. 17 restaurants needing someone above suspicion. Turn failing operations into profit centers. Show Marcus you're not just a forced wife, but a real partner. 2 days later, Ruby was conducting her first audit at Antonio's, a struggling restaurant in Midtown. The manager, Tony Ricci, was a nervous man with gambling debts written all over his face. Ruby had spent the previous night learning the books with Marcus, who'd explained the dual nature of every business. You've stolen $197,000, Ruby said, laying out the evidence in Tony's cramped office. Inflated costs, ghost employees, cash skimming. You're robbing us to pay the bratva. Tony went gray. I can explain. You're in debt for $300,000. The Russians will kill you regardless of how much you pay them. That's how loan sharks work. Ruby leaned forward, channeling Victoria's authority. Here's your only chance. Return every penny. Work for free until it's paid. We'll handle the bratva. Steal again, and we gift wrap you for them ourselves. I understand, Tony whispered. Good. $50,000 down payment tomorrow. And Tony, make this restaurant profitable again, or our deal's off. Walking out, Ruby felt a rush of real power. Her phone buzzed. Marcus. How'd it go? He agreed, 50,000 tomorrow. Impressive, meet me at Fulton Street warehouse in an hour. Another problem. At Fulton, Marcus waited with a stunning woman, tall, elegant, with the kind of beauty that required professional maintenance. Ruby, this is Gabriella Romano. She runs pharmaceutical distribution for us. Gabriella's handshake was calculated, competitive. The girl who screamed at him in Bellissimo. How charming. Gabriella's been with me 5 years, Marcus said. Very close. The implication was clear. Ruby recognized territorial marking when she saw it. Then you must be devastated, watching him marry someone else. Gabriella's smile went rigid. We're missing 2 Canadian shipments, Marcus said, tension crackling. Gabriella thinks it's the supplier. I think it's internal. It's the supplier, Gabriella insisted. Pierre's been unreliable. We should cut ties. Or, Ruby said slowly, puzzle pieces clicking together, someone wants us to cut ties with a reliable supplier to create chaos. Who benefits if we lose Pierre? Both stared at her. Explain, Marcus said. If the supplier was stealing, they'd take small amounts over time. 2 entire shipments missing at once? That's sabotage. Someone wants us fighting with our supplier while they position themselves as the replacement. Ruby turned to Gabriella. Who else has approached us about Canadian supply? The Moretti family, Marcus said, his expression sharpening. And if we're fighting with Pierre, we'd be vulnerable, desperate for alternatives. Ruby looked at Gabriella. Has anyone from the Moretti family contacted you? Gabriella's silence was damning. Have you been talking to the Morettis? Marcus's voice went cold, dangerous. They approached me for intelligence gathering, Gabriella said quickly. Just casual conversation. While shipments went missing, while you pushed to cut Pierre, while the Morettis waited to sweep in with a replacement. Marcus stepped closer. You're suspended, effective immediately. After Gabriella left, humiliated and furious, Marcus turned to Ruby. You saw through that in 5 minutes. Gabriella missed it for weeks. Or didn't want to see it, Ruby said. Question is, was she incompetent or complicit? That's what I intend to find out. He studied her. Think you can fix the pharmaceutical operation? I don't know anything about it. You figured out how to confront thieves this morning. Study this. He handed her a binder thick with information. 48 hours to present a solution. That night, they worked together until midnight, Marcus explaining terminology, Ruby asking questions that cut through complexity to core issues. Somewhere in those hours, the space between them shifted from strangers to something else, partnership, and maybe, possibly, the beginning of something real. Thank you for staying until the end. If this story moved you, subscribe and join our community of storytelling lovers. Drop a comment with your thoughts. I read everyone. See you next time.